Lena stood in the half-shadow of the spacious hall, as if she herself had become part of this silent, morning light-filled interior. A woman of about 35, slender, reservedly elegant, her figure still retained its former flexibility, but there was something tired in her posture, slightly drooping shoulders, as if the weight of the last months had crushed them with an invisible hand. She was wearing a light gray cashmere cardigan, loosely thrown over a thin shirt, and dark jeans, casual, but tastefully chosen clothes, reflecting her subtle sense of style. Her dark hair, pulled back into a messy bun, fell in thin strands at her temples, giving her face a slightly disheveled, vulnerable look. There was something at once refined and wary about her high cheekbones, the thin line of her lips, and the deep-set, gray-green eyes. There were faint shadows under her eyes, traces of sleepless nights and worries that linger even when all seems calm. She was still beautiful, but this beauty had become different, mature, a little sad, as if it had been through fire and water. Lena no longer tried to make an impression, did not wear jewelry, except for a wedding ring, which now seemed to her not a symbol of love, but a cold reminder of something lost. And yet, her appearance showed an inner strength, not ostentatious, not theatrical, but such that is born in the silence of long reflections and decisions made. The California sun was shining outside the tall windows. Her husband, Michael Sterling, was already in town. His day began before hers. Michael was the San Francisco district attorney, a man of ironclad principles and impeccable reputation. These were the qualities that had once attracted Lena more than 10 years ago. She remembered his confident smile and the sparkle in his eyes as he spoke of justice and the law. Back then, she had thought that she would always be safe with him. However, the years of living together gradually erased the sparkle of romance. Michael disappeared more and more at work, conducting high-profile cases and rarely being home until late at night. Lena did not sit idly by either. Her legal career was developing successfully. She worked as a corporate law consultant in a large firm, and although her achievements paled in comparison to her husband's victories in court, she was proud of her independence. However, recently Lena increasingly found herself feeling lonely. Her conversations with Michael were limited to exchanging news about work or discussing the weekly schedule. Warm words and heartfelt conversations were a thing of the past. Sometimes it seemed to her that she lived with a roommate, not with her beloved husband. Famlish and Michael were limited to the two of them and a large retriever named Max. They had failed to have children, and this unspoken pain always stood between the lines of their communication. They tried to become parents for a long time. Several miscarriages, endless visits to doctors. In the end, the doctors threw up their hands. Lena's health had deteriorated. There were almost no chances left. Michael consoled her, saying that they would live happily together. But Lena saw how her husband looked with envy at his colleagues playing with their children on weekends. The topic remained an unhealed wound. Both tried to avoid it in silence, but the pain from this silence permeated their lives. Lena walked into the kitchen, poured herself a cup of coffee, and leaned her side against the marble countertop. She thoughtfully looked at the sunbeams playing on the Spanish tiles of the floor. She didn't have to go to the office today. She had taken the day off, deciding to dedicate the day to herself. A bitter thought stirred inside her. Would Michael notice her absence from home in the evening, or would he stay at the prosecutor's office until night again, working on his case of the century? Remembering this, Lena sighed heavily. For several weeks, Michael had been absorbed in preparing for the trial of a certain Adam Rivera, a businessman accused of securities fraud and large-scale fraud. The case was making waves across the country. Rivera was suspected of creating a financial pyramid, defrauding thousands of investors and laundering millions of dollars. Michael, as Lena learned from the news and from her husband himself, was leading the prosecution, and the upcoming trial promised to be a triumph or a failure for his entire career. Of course, Michael could hardly talk about the details of the case at home, and Lena didn't try to ask, understanding the ethical prohibition. But she saw how his eyes lit up whenever someone mentioned Rivera's name. Michael was sure that he would be able to put the swindler behind bars for a long time, and that this would make the world a little fairer. Lena shared his disgust for those who profited from innocent people, but deep down she was oppressed by her husband's obsession with this process. It seemed that nothing else existed for him except work. She took a sip of hot coffee, feeling the bitterness of the drink echo inside her with a similar bitterness of dissatisfaction. Something had changed in her lately. Sometimes at night, lying alone on her half of the wide bed, Lena wondered where the cheerful and loving woman she had been many years ago had gone. The one who waited with bated breath for Michael to come home from work so she could throw herself on his neck when they met. Now she often fell asleep alone, and in the morning she found her husband already gone long before dawn. Having finished her coffee, Lena firmly decided. Today she would go out into the city, walk along the embankment, drop into some art center or coffee shop, and read a book. She needed to get some fresh air, get out of this golden cage of a spacious but so empty house. Her own company was now preferable to walls that reminded her of past happiness. An hour later, having slightly primped herself and chosen a light summer dress, Lena left the house. Max followed her with a plaintive look. The dog, it seemed, was also saddened by the absence of his owners. "Well, my friend, I'll be back soon," she said affectionately, stroking the retriever's soft ears, and closed the door behind her. She didn't want to take the car. Fresh air and movement promised to relieve the tension, so Lena walked towards the bay, where there were cozy streets with cafes and art galleries. San Francisco was waking up. The bustle of the city was picking up speed. Lena walked along the well-kept streets of her quiet Presidio Heights neighborhood, where expensive mansions were buried in green gardens. Jogger neighbors ran past with headphones, nannies walked golden retrievers similar to her Max, businesswomen in suits hurried to their cars. Usually, Lena hardly noticed this morning life, rushing to the office, but today she deliberately walked slowly, peering into the faces of passers-by. The world around her lived a full life. Someone laughed, talking on the phone, someone hastily kissed a child goodbye before school. She herself seemed invisible among them. Lena walked down a picturesque street lined with bright bougainvilleas and headed toward the marina embankment. The air here was cooler and smelled of the salty ocean. The Golden Gate Bridge loomed majestically on the horizon, and the water of the bay sparkled in the sun. A cyclist rode past, loudly greeting a familiar passerby. Life was in full swing around her, and Lena felt slightly dizzy from the realization. Here it was, the real world that had passed her by for so many years. Lena paused at the window of a small bookstore, looking at the beautifully designed covers. Her attention was drawn to a book with a catchy title about female self-worth. A bitter smile touched her lips. Just what the doctor ordered, she thought to herself, remembering her own insecurities of the past months. At that moment, she caught the reflection of a man's figure behind her in the glass of the display case. Someone had stopped nearby to look at the books. A common occurrence, a passerby interested in the same thing as she was. But Lena noticed out of the corner of her eye that the stranger was not looking at the display case at all, but at her. Her heart suddenly skipped a beat in surprise, and she turned around. In front of Lena stood a tall, dark-haired man of about 40 with a charming, easygoing smile, as if he had been used to feeling confident in any situation since childhood. His face was tanned, with clear cheekbones and barely noticeable stubble, giving his appearance a slight unshaven audacity. Dark, slightly wavy hair was neatly trimmed, but not styled deliberately. A strand had fallen out onto his forehead, as if emphasizing the very carelessness that had become part of his style. He was wearing a carefully tailored dark blue suit made of fine Italian wool, which sat perfectly, emphasizing his athletic figure, but without a tie. The top button of his shirt was undone, which made his look less formal, almost intimate. The cuffs of his shirt peeked out from under the sleeves of his jacket, and the cufflinks laconic, silver caught the morning light, as if hinting at taste and wealth. Brown eyes, lively, attentive, slightly squinting, studied Lena with an interest that mixed friendliness and something else, almost elusive, a slight challenge or the beginning of flirtation. It was clear that he was a man accustomed to being noticed, but there was no importance in his gaze, only a confident openness, the one that does not press, but attracts. In his hands he held a hardcover book, new, with crisp pages, as if he had just picked it up from the shelf. A white paper bag with an elegant bookstore logo peeked out from under his arm, the thin handles hanging like threads, bent by movement. He held it casually, as if the book were a natural extension of his arm, and he himself a man who often picked up books, not only to buy them, but also out of habit. "Sorry if I startled you," the stranger said in a soft baritone, noticing her confusion. "You were just looking at that book so thoughtfully. I wanted to know if it was really good." Lena felt the blood rush to her cheeks from embarrassment. The stranger spoke with a slight smile, without a hint of aggression or intrusiveness. Rather, his voice sounded genuinely interested, with a slightly playful note. "Oh, I don't know myself," Lena answered, nodding at the display case. "The title just caught my attention, but I haven't read it." The stranger raised his eyebrows slightly, glancing at the cover behind the glass. "Wake Up for Yourself," he read the title aloud. "It sounds a bit pretentious, but maybe there's something worthwhile inside." Lena smiled faintly at his casually ironic intonation. She felt a little better. It seemed there was no danger here, just a random passerby who had started a conversation. "Maybe," she shrugged, "although such books are usually full of banalities. But who knows, maybe they really do help someone wake up." The man laughed quietly. "You are right. There is so much published now on the topic of self-help and self-discovery. Personally, a good detective or classic helps me more often. It distracts me from my own thoughts." Lena noticed that she liked the timbre of his laughter, low, sincere. The stranger clearly knew how to win people over. She turned slightly towards him, still holding her hands on the strap of her bag. "Yes, sometimes the best way to solve problems is to lose yourself in someone else's story for a while," she agreed. "I used to read thrillers when I was young." "Oh, me too," the man perked up. "By the way, my name Isman," he introduced himself, leaning forward slightly and openly examining Lena, inviting her to say her name as well. Lena noticed something flash in his eyes when he said his name, as if he was expecting a reaction. But the name meant nothing to her. Adam, you never know." She smiled politely and replied, "Lena." "Nice to meet you, Lena." Adam said her name with an unexpectedly soft accent on the first syllable, giving it a new color. "If you don't mind." He raised the paper cup in his hand, which Lena had only just noticed. "Join me. I was just about to have a coffee, and talking to myself isn't that exciting." She wanted to politely decline. After all, he was a complete stranger. But something in Adam's open, inviting manner suggested that he was not dangerous. And the warm summer day, the easy conversation, all this was so far from her usual routine. Lena suddenly caught herself thinking that she had not felt such carefree interest from a man for many years. "You know, I don't think I mind," she heard herself say. "Coffee never hurts." Adam smiled wider, gesturing towards the tables of the nearest cafe, where they were actually standing. "Excellent. Moreover, they say they have excellent cappuccino here." Together they approached a free table near the openwork fence of the summer terrace. Lena sat down on a chair, feeling slightly nervous, like a student on her first date. What was she doing? Sitting with a stranger, drinking coffee in broad daylight. Michael would be surprised. Although, she thought with unexpected bitterness, Michael would hardly be interested in what she was doing. "Actually, we've met before," Adam said suddenly as the waitress took Lena's latte order and walked away. He put his almost finished cappuccino on the table and looked at her mysteriously. Lena frowned, trying to remember where she could have seen this man before. Memory insistently claimed that they had not crossed paths before. "Really? Sorry, I can't remember." She shook her head in embarrassment, feeling awkward. Adam leaned forward slightly, lowering his voice as if he was about to impart a big secret. "In the courtroom." Lena's inside sank. In the courtroom? She hadn't been to court hearings that often. She'd only attended her husband's high-profile trials a couple of times and sometimes accompanied the firm's clients on civil suits. Was he really a lawyer or a journalist? Looking at her interlocutor again, she saw nothing that would give away a legal profession. More like a businessman, an expensive watch, a confident manner. I was one of the spectators at the trial, Adam said with a sly smile, clearly enjoying the effect he had produced. A couple of months ago, there was a case of major fraud in the city council. Remember the kickback scandal? Lena nodded, confused. Of course, she remembered Michael had secured a guilty verdict for a corrupt official. It had been widely covered in the press. She had been present when the verdict was announced, a rare occasion when her husband himself had invited her to support him at the end of the trial. But there had been so many people in the courtroom, so many journalists. How could she have noticed this man there? Adam seemed to read her thoughts. Naturally, you didn't notice me. I was sitting behind, and at that moment all eyes were on your husband. The last words hung in the air like a drop of poison. Lena involuntarily straightened up. He knows who she is. He saw her with Michael in court, and here she is, sitting at the same table with him. Lena felt her heart beating faster and faster. She wanted to say something harsh or just get up and leave, but curiosity overcame her indignation. "So you know who my husband is," she said quietly, looking Adam straight in the eyes. He leaned back slightly, raising his palms in a placating gesture. "Please, don't think anything bad. I wasn't stalking you on purpose, Lena. It was pure chance that we met at the shop window. It's just that when I recognized you, I decided to talk after all. We've already, so to speak, known each other in absentia." "Do you know each other?" she asked again, puzzled. The waitress had just brought her a latte, and Lena, thanking her automatically, wrapped her hands around the hot cup, trying to stop her fingers from shaking. Adam was clearly not the simple passerby he had seemed at first. "Well, I've heard quite a bit about you from mutual friends." Adam searched for words. "Everyone in the legal world knows Michael Sterling, and of course, everyone has heard about his wife." Lena narrowed her eyes slightly. It sounded too nice to be true. What business did a businessman have with the wives of prosecutors? Mutual acquaintances probably meant his lawyers or colleagues who had encountered Michael. "Now it's my turn to ask, have we met?" She tried to take control of the situation. "Or were you interested in me for some reason?" The question sounded more pointed than she had intended. Adam didn't seem offended at all. He raised his cup to his lips and took a small sip, never taking his eyes off Lena. "I was impressed by the way you held yourself in court," he said calmly. "You seemed so proud, strong, like a rock supporting her husband. It's not every day you see such a devoted wife in the audience when the verdict is read out." Lena looked down, feeling an unbidden wave of embarrassment. She had truly felt proud of Michael that day and had tried to look dignified in front of the cameras. Who would have thought that it would impress anyone in the audience? "I was just sitting and listening," she muttered, taking a sip of her latte. The drink burned the roof of her mouth, but the pain actually helped her get a grip on herself. "Don't exaggerate." "You stood out from the crowd to me," Adam said softly. "To be honest, I couldn't forget you for a long time after that trial." He said it almost tenderly, and Lena felt everything inside her turn over. This can't be. The man she sees for the second time in her life says such things. Isn't it too bold? "But you understood that I was married," she remarked rather coldly, "and that my husband was a prosecutor, with whom it was better not to quarrel." Adam smiled at the corner of his mouth, looking off to the side as if weighing something. "I respect your husband, believe me. He's a great professional. But as I understand it, he's a bit obsessed with his career." He raised an eyebrow questioningly. "Forgive me if I'm butting in where it doesn't belong." Lena was tensely silent. She was amazed at how accurately a stranger had grasped the essence of the problem, which she had never told anyone about. Not to her friends, and especially not out loud to herself. Michael was career-obsessed. That was the truth she was afraid to admit. And this outsider was now saying it bluntly. Well, no wonder. The outsider often sees it better. "Probably any person who strives for success is obsessed with something," Lena said carefully after a pause. "It's not a vice." "Of course," Adam agreed easily, "as long as it doesn't bother my loved ones." Lena looked up sharply. Adam's eyes were full of sympathy. It was as if he pitied her. This thought caused a wave of protest to rise inside her. She didn't need pity, but somewhere deep inside, a quiet voice whispered that it was precisely self-pity that she sometimes lacked to admit. She was unhappy. "Excuse me," she said, involuntarily sharply. "We barely know each other, and yet you are making bold conclusions." Adam nodded slightly, accepting her reproach. "Excuse me, I suppose it's none of my business." "You're right." He set his cup down on the saucer. "Let's talk about something else." Like, he glanced quickly at the book he was holding. "Literature, since we're meeting at the bookstore. What was the last book you read that really captivated you?" Lena allowed the topic to change. She herself did not want to discuss personal matters any further. Besides, she was hurt that she had reacted so violently. She had clearly revealed her dissatisfaction with her family life to a practically stranger. They talked for about another hour. The topics flowed easily, from the latest literary novelties to favorite childhood films. Lena caught herself laughing at Adam's jokes and telling stories from university that she hadn't remembered for many years. Adam turned out to be a wonderful conversationalist, attentive, witty, educated. If it weren't for the initial awkward conversation about Michael, one could have thought that this was an ordinary, pleasant acquaintance of two people without ulterior motives. Time flew by. Lena suddenly glanced at the clock on her phone screen and gasped. "It's already 1:30. I have to go." She reluctantly got up from the table. She didn't want to leave at all, but suddenly she felt like something was wrong. She should be at home or doing her own thing, not chatting for hours with an attractive stranger who was also clearly interested in her. Adam stood up too, his gaze darkening slightly as if he regretted ending their conversation. "It was nice to meet you, Lena," he said quietly. "I didn't think that this day would give me such a meeting." Lena lowered her eyes, hiding the blush that had flared up. What was she doing? Flirting? Her heart was pounding. "It was nice too," she said, trying to sound calm. "Thank you for the company and the coffee." She took a step, intending to leave, but suddenly Adam touched her elbow gently. His touch was delicate, but it made her stop. "Can we see each other again?" he asked quietly. There was genuine hope in his voice. "I understand it's complicated. You probably don't want to disrupt anything in your life. But maybe just as friends? Talk again?" Lena froze, torn between reason and the heat that rolled inside her at his words. As friends, she understood perfectly well what this could lead to if she agreed, and yet something did not allow her to decisively refuse. I don't know," she answered honestly. "It's really complicated, Adam." He nodded, understanding. He let go of her hand. "Of course, I won't insist, but..." He took a business card from his breast pocket and handed it to her. "Here's my number. If you suddenly want to discuss the new book or have coffee, I'll be glad to hear from you at any time." Lena hesitantly took the business card. Black embossed font, Adam Rivera, CEO, Rivercore Investments. Her heart sank. Rivera, that very name from the news. Michael had said Adam Rivera. Could it be? She looked up at Adam, unable to hide her shock. He was calmly waiting for her reaction. There was a strange combination of tension and sadness in his gaze. "Are you that Adam Rivera?" Lena asked quietly, feeling a lump in her throat. Adam nodded slowly. "I'm afraid so. That one. The branded fraud from the evening news." He tried to smile, but it came out bitter. "But how?" Lena faltered, looking at him in amazement. "You understand that your husband wants to lock me up for 20 years? I understand," Adam finished for her. "That's why I didn't give you my last name right away. I didn't want to put you in an awkward position." Lena took a deep breath, feeling everything inside her mixed up shock, fear, pity. She remembered what stood behind the name Rivera, thousands of deceived families, pensioners who had lost their savings, and this man in front of her was the culprit. But did he look like a cold-blooded swindler? Now Adam just looked tired and sad. "Lena," he said softly, "I'm not asking you for anything. Just know that not everything they say on TV is true. Maybe someday we can talk about it. And now, goodbye." He nodded politely and, without waiting for an answer, turned and walked away down the sidewalk. Lena watched him go, feeling her heart ache with a sharp duality. She still had the business card with his name clutched in her hand. She knew she should throw it away right now and forget this conversation as if nothing had happened. That would be the right thing to do. But instead, Lena carefully put the card in her purse, as if the rectangle of thick paper was fragile and valuable. A few minutes later, she was slowly walking home along the embankment, and Adam's words kept ringing in her ears. Not everything they say is true. Was he claiming that he was innocent, or that he was being unfairly accused? Michael was categorical in his assessment of Rivera, but her husband was looking at it from his own legal perspective, where all defendants were villains until proven otherwise. Lena herself did not notice how she began to justify in her thoughts a man whom she barely knew, a man whose name she had recognized only a couple of minutes ago. But for some reason, this knowledge did not push Adam away from her heart, but on the contrary, it felt a strange pity and interest. Michael had never told her the details of the Rivera case. Only once he had said that the defense was trying to press on the incompetence of the evidence. Maybe the charges really weren't that strong. Lena stopped, shaking her head. What was she doing? She shouldn't even think about Adam Rivera under any circumstances. She was the prosecutor's wife and a lawyer herself. Ethical standards weren't just empty words for her. And yet, Adam's brown eyes and quiet voice when he asked to meet again were etched into her memory. That's the way you look at a person you trust. She hadn't had that look for a long time. The house greeted her with cool silence. Max raised his head from his bunk, but Lena walked past him straight into her office, unable to find a place for herself. There, at the huge oak table, piled high with folders with contracts, she stopped, pulled a business card out of her bag, and looked for a long time at the name embossed in gold letters. Adam Rivera. Now she had a face, a voice, and a story behind the name, and something told her that the story wasn't over for her. The evening of the same day was unusually cold, despite the summer season. Lena sat in the living room, wrapped in a blanket, and absent-mindedly looked at the TV screen. The news was playing in the background, and suddenly she heard a familiar name. Adam Rivera will appear in court in 3 weeks. She shuddered and stared at the TV. The channel was showing a story. They were showing archival footage of Rivera's arrest outside his office, then the announcer's commentary. He has been charged with financial fraud in the amount of more than $100 million. District Attorney Michael Sterling intends to bring the case to a verdict despite the resistance of the defense team. The announcer continued to say something, but Lena was no longer listening. She was looking at the image of Michael that flashed on the screen. He was standing in front of the press, focused, serious, answering the journalists' questions. Another moment, and the camera caught Adam Rivera's face as he was led away in handcuffs. Lena felt nausea rising in her throat. It seemed incomprehensible to her that the man with whom she had drunk coffee and talked about books today could be the same shameless fraud that was spoken of with such contempt. She pressed the button on the remote, turning off the TV, and at the same second she heard the front door open. Michael was back. It was almost 10 o'clock in the evening. Lena rose to meet him, trying to calm the mixed feeling of anxiety and guilt. Anxiety from the plot she had seen, guilt from the fact that her thoughts constantly returned to another man today. Michael looked haggard. His tie was loosened, the top button of his shirt was undone, and there was stubble on his face. When he saw his wife, he tried to smile, but it came out rather mechanically. "Hello," he said tiredly, kissing Lena on the cheek out of habit. "Sorry, I'm late again. There was a meeting this afternoon on Rivera's lawyer's motions, then a meeting at the mayor's office." Lena took his jacket and briefcase as usual. Her inside sank at the mention of Rivera's name. She tried to appear unperturbed and put on a slight smile. "It's okay, I understand. Have you had dinner?" Michael nodded, walking into the living room and sinking onto the couch with a look of complete exhaustion. "Had a snack on the go. How was your day? I thought you were at home." Lena hesitated for a split second. Michael rarely asked such questions. They usually had no time to talk about trivialities. Was he really showing concern, or was he just being polite? Yes, I took a day off. I walked around the city a bit, she said carefully. And then I read. Michael nodded absent-mindedly, already, it seemed, immersed in his thoughts. She sat down next to him, hoping that he would say something else, ask for more details. But her husband only leaned his head back on the back of the sofa and closed his eyes. I'm terribly tired, he muttered. Tomorrow morning I have to go to court again. You can't imagine how clever Rivera's lawyers are. They're always trying to get out of it. Lena looked at him in profile. The shadows from the lamp fell on Michael's features, which she had once known down to the last detail. Now they seemed sharp and hardened. How well did she even know this man now? Mike. She began quietly, not knowing what she wanted to say, to ask, "Are you happy? Are you satisfied with our life? Or, do you notice that we've become strangers?" But the word stuck. He opened his eyes and turned his head towards her. Lena swallowed. It was especially scary to talk with Rivera, as if her husband could tell what was going on inside her just by looking at her face. Nothing. Just, maybe take a day off? You're really stressed out. Michael chuckled weakly and stretched, working out his stiff neck. After the verdict, I'll take it, I promise. I need a break myself. I only have 3 weeks left to hold out. He stood up, making it clear that the conversation was over, and headed towards the bedroom, saying as he went, I think I'll go straight to bed. Are you coming? Lena watched him go, feeling the usual bitterness. Hold out for 3 weeks, and then another new task, another race. He had no idea that she didn't mean physical rest. I'll be right there, she responded. As Michael disappeared behind the bedroom door, Lena pulled out her phone. Her hand shook as she found an unfamiliar number in her card holder and entered it into her contacts under the neutral name R. She had barely finished when she heard snoring coming from the bedroom. Michael had passed out almost instantly as soon as his head hit the pillow. Lena was left sitting in the darkness of the living room, lit only by the screen of her phone. She was replaying the conversation with Adam in her head, his words, his intonations, her own reflection in his eyes. Lena quietly entered the bedroom. Michael was already asleep, his breathing even. She stopped at the door, looking at the familiar silhouette on the bed in the semi-darkness. Her heart sank painfully. Once upon a time, the picture of her husband sleeping peacefully made her smile and feel tenderness. She remembered the first night in this house. Then, 10 years ago, they moved into a new mansion, happy and young. Michael, still a budding prosecutor, helped carry boxes and kept joking that there was enough room in the living room for a football field. Late in the evening, exhausted, they collapsed right on the mattress without a bed, hugging under one blanket. Lena then looked at her husband's profile in the light of a street lamp and thanked fate for every minute they were together. Where is all that now? The feeling of security, pride in him, in them. She had once even been proud to be part of his world, the world of law and order. Lena ran her hand along the doorframe, remembering another episode. Michael waking her up in the middle of the night, beaming, inviting her to watch the Perseid meteor shower from the yard behind the house. They had run out into the cold night air in their pajamas, laughing under one blanket, looking up at the sky. I will always protect you, he had whispered, holding her close. Tears welled up in Lena's eyes. There he was, right next to her, just a few steps away, and there was an abyss between them. She returned to the living room, trying to be quiet. A conflict raged inside her. She desperately wanted to write to Adam, to hear his voice, and at the same time, she was afraid to cross the line. Before she could fully comprehend what she was doing, she typed out a short message. This is Lena. You asked me to write. Having reread the condensed phrase 3 times, Lena pressed send before shyness took over. Her heart began to pound. What if it was in vain? It was already night. No, he probably wasn't sleeping. Such people have a different routine. The answer came almost immediately. The screen showed, glad you wrote. How are you? Lena froze, looking at the strange beginning. Then she realized, Rad, obviously Rad, a typo on speed dial. He was glad. She felt a strange relief and then a wary delight. He was waiting for her message. I don't know why I'm writing. She started to type, but erased it. Instead, she replied, I couldn't sleep. Your words won't leave my head. After a few seconds, mine too. I'm glad they responded. Then another message. If you want to talk or ask questions, I'm always open. Lena glanced toward the bedroom. Silence, only her husband's even breathing. She suddenly had a painful urge to run out of the house, to run wherever her eyes looked. Or to Adam. To hear his voice, to make sure that she wasn't going crazy, that that hour over coffee was reality. She dialed. Can I make a call? The answer came instantly, certainly. Lena took a deep breath and pressed the call icon before she could change her mind. The phone buzzed briefly, establishing a connection. Hello, came a familiar baritone. Not the formal one he used during the day, but quiet, almost a whisper, as if for her alone. Hi, Lena breathed out, surprising herself with her own courage. Did I wake you up? No, of course not, Adam's voice immediately perked up. I haven't been sleeping much lately. Glad to hear from you. For a few seconds, both were silent. Lena didn't know how to start the conversation. She wanted to ask 1,000 things. Is he really guilty? Is he afraid of the court? Why did he divorce his wife, if he had one? And at the same time, I didn't want to climb. I'm pleased too, she finally said. I guess I shouldn't have written. Don't say that, Adam stopped her gently. I'm glad to communicate with you in any way, Lena. I won't forget today. His sincerity warmed through the speaker, and Lena suddenly realized that she was smiling, pressing the phone to her ear like a girl. I saw the news about you, she said quietly, on TV. Nothing pleasant, I suppose, he chuckled. I tried not to look, but they told me they were throwing mud at me. Adam, are you really? She hesitated. How to ask, you really aren't guilty. He understood without words. Lena, his voice was even and serious. I will tell you the same thing I told my lawyers. I did not commit the crime I am accused of. Yes, I ran an investment company. Yes, there was a crash and many people lost money. But I did not build a pyramid scheme, and I did not steal intentionally. The market collapsed, and I along with my clients. Lena listened, holding her breath. The words seemed logical. She knew how loud processes sometimes turn out to be multi-layered. But the prosecutor's office is sure that you deceived investors, she quietly objected. The prosecution wants to find a scapegoat, he snapped. Forgive me for saying this in front of you, but your husband wants a career victory. He wants a trophy. Lena was at a loss for words. On the one hand, she wanted to protect Michael. He believed Rivera was a fraud. But what if Adam was right and Michael was deluded by ambition? I don't ask you to take my word for it, Adam continued more gently. But I ask only one thing. Don't think of me as a monster in advance. I'm an ordinary man, perhaps in the wrong place. Lena suddenly felt the despair in Adam's voice that he tried to hide. He was afraid of the trial, of the possibility of prison, and now he was sharing this with her, the wife of his opponent. I don't know what to say, she whispered. Nothing is needed, he replied. Your voice is already a great consolation. He spoke again in a gentle tone that wrapped Lena around him like a warm blanket. In a matter of hours, this man had become closer to her than her own husband had been in the last few months. The thought was both sweet and bitter at the same time. We shouldn't. She blurted out, and she herself didn't fully understand what she was talking about the calls, about the sympathy that was clearly developing between them. It's wrong. On the other end of the line, Adam was silent for a couple of heartbeats, then quietly asked, It seems wrong, but why then is it so necessary? Lena closed her eyes. Yes, she needed to hear him now, to feel needed by someone. This was stronger than rational arguments. I don't know, she felt traitorous tears welling up in her eyes. Forgive me. Don't cry, Adam whispered. Please, everything will be okay. They talked for a long time, maybe an hour, maybe more. Lena talked about her childhood in Seattle, about why she became a lawyer. Adam shared a funny story about his first job. Time lost its meaning. It seemed that night they became closer than years of acquaintance would allow. When the call finally ended, the phone battery was dead. Lena realized that dawn was already turning gray outside. She barely had time to rush to the bedroom and lie down before Michael's alarm rang. He got up without noticing anything and went off to another workday. And Lena, who had not closed her eyes all night, remained lying there, feeling strange happiness and pain at the same time. She had crossed an invisible line, and she knew it. The next few days turned into a fog for Lena. During the day, she did her work mechanically, answered calls from clients, went to meetings, but her thoughts invariably returned to her nightly conversation with Adam. Her phone was burning her pocket. She wanted to write to him every free minute, and he seemed to feel the same. He sent short messages in the morning wishing her a good day, and in the afternoon asked how she was feeling. Lena caught herself smiling at the screen of her smartphone more often than at the living people around her. Michael, immersed in preparing for the trial, barely noticed her elevated mood. He left the house before she woke up and returned late. A couple of times Lena tried to start a conversation with him at dinner, but Michael either immediately changed the topic to work or nodded absent-mindedly, not really listening. At another time, this would have been a painful sting, but now she felt as if she were under anesthesia. All the emotions, all the colors of life were concentrated around the secret communication with Adam. 3 days after their first call, Adam suggested meeting. At first, he cautiously asked if she could find time to have coffee during the day in a public place, like ordinary acquaintances. But Lena, to her own surprise, rejected the idea. It's too risky during the day, she wrote to him. Someone might see. San Francisco wasn't a small city, but the legal world was small. She didn't want to run into someone she knew hand in hand with a defendant in her husband's case. Adam quickly found a solution. Then I'll rent a hotel room, just to talk calmly. At first, Lena's heart sank into her heels at these words, a hotel alone. But then she convinced herself that they really would just talk. After all, they had already discussed so much on the phone, couldn't they control themselves in person? On the appointed evening, Lena told Michael that she would be late at the office. It was her first outright lie to her husband. Her throat was constricted as she wrote him a message. We're in a rush with the contract, I'll be late. Michael's response came quickly. Okay, don't wait, I'll go to bed early, I have an important meeting tomorrow. Not a shadow of suspicion, he was used to her having a lot of work too. Lena felt a pang of conscience. She changed at the office, deliberately choosing a formal pantsuit to feel more put together. But her heart was still pounding on the way to the hotel. Was it worth going? There was nothing irreparable between her and Adam yet, other than a few calls and a cup of coffee. She could just stop and go home. However, the car itself turned to the specified address, a respectable boutique hotel on a quiet street in Nob Hill. Lena parked nearby and sat for a few minutes, looking at the entrance, decorated with a stylish awning. None of the passers-by paid attention to the woman in the car, a common occurrence. Finally, she made up her mind. She walked quickly into the lobby. There was no one at the reception desk. Adam had probably already made all the arrangements in advance. Jazz was playing softly in the deserted foyer. The air was filled with the scent of expensive candles. The blood was roaring in Lena's ears, so much that it seemed to her that the doorman at the door could hear her excitement. The elevator took her to the 5th floor. The corridor was covered with a soft carpet, muffling the sound of her footsteps. Room 508. Lena paused in front of the door before knocking, checking if she was breathing evenly. Her hands were shaking slightly. It was not too late to leave. The door opened before she could even raise her hand to knock. Adam seemed to be waiting right behind her. He immediately stepped forward, looked around the hallway, and gently pulled Lena inside, closing the door with a latch. Sorry, I'm sorry, he corrected himself, releasing her hand. I was worried that you wouldn't come. Lena pressed her back against the door, trying to cope with the overwhelming feelings. Adam was so close that she could smell the subtle scent of his cologne fresh, with a hint of bitterness. He was wearing a casual dark sweater and jeans, nothing formal. She was used to seeing him in a suit. I didn't believe myself that I would come, she admitted slightly hoarsely. Adam looked into her eyes carefully. If you feel this is wrong, I will understand, he said quietly. You can leave as soon as you say so. He stood so close, but did not touch. Only his eyes, dark and agitated, betrayed the inner tension. Lena closed her eyes for a second, making her choice. Then she slowly shook her head. No, I want to stay. A sigh of relief escaped his chest. Adam stepped back, giving her space, and pointed to a small table where a chilled carafe of water and 2 glasses already sat. Sit down. You must be nervous. Water or wine? I have a bottle of Chardonnay. I thought maybe we could relax a little. Water, please, she asked, walking over and sitting down on a chair. Her legs were shaking. Adam poured her a glass of ice water. Lena took a few sips, feeling her dry throat come alive. Adam, meanwhile, poured himself some water, although there really was an unopened bottle of wine on the table. He was clearly trying to show that he wasn't going to get her drunk. Thank you, she whispered, setting down her glass. I'm just a little nervous. It's natural, he responded softly, sitting down at the corner of the table, but not too close. My palms are sweaty too, to be honest. He showed her his slightly trembling hands in a playful gesture, and Lena couldn't help but smile. The tension eased a little. For a few minutes they talked about trivialities, how their day had gone, what the traffic jams were like. Gradually, their hearts slowed down from their mad run. Lena even laughed once, hearing Adam impersonate a grumpy lawyer from his team. As the pause dragged on, Adam's expression changed. It was as if he had made an important decision. Lena, he said quietly, leaning forward and covering her hand with his. I'm so glad you're here. You have no idea how lonely I've been all these months under the gun of accusations. His palm was warm, his fingers gently squeezed her hand. Lena didn't pull it away, although everything inside flared up. I was lonely too, she blurted out. Her voice was shaking. But it's wrong. Why? He asked softly, looking into her eyes. Because someone decided that we were on opposite sides of the barricades, that we had no right to. He didn't finish, but it was clear what he meant. The right to happiness, to warmth, to love. Lena felt a treacherous tear roll down her cheek. So many nights she cried into her pillow, thinking that no one needed her, that life was passing her by. And now there was a man nearby who saw her pain and tried to comfort her. Adam, she whispered. He stood up, gently pulling her to stand with him. She obeyed, barely aware of what she was doing. They stood face to face, so close that she could see her own worried eyes reflected in his. Adam lifted his hand and gently brushed a strand of hair from her cheek. Just say the word and I'll stop, he said in a breaking voice. Lena put her trembling hands on his chest in response. Through the thin wool of the sweater, one could feel the strong beating of his heart. No more words were needed. Adam slowly leaned down and touched her lips with his. From this soft, careful touch, the world around seemed to explode with colors. Lena closed her eyes, responding to the kiss, and felt something hot and long forgotten awaken inside. The kiss quickly stopped being timid, as if all the longing and passion that had accumulated over the years had come pouring out. Adam pulled her closer, hugging her around the waist, and Lena herself reached out to him, forgetting about everything. His fingers slid down her back, carefully exploring every curve. Lena felt goosebumps run across her skin with each touch. A flame flared in her chest, a heat she had not known for many years. She ran her palm over his chest, feeling the rapid beating of his heart under the fabric. Their breaths mingled. Adam whispered gentle, slightly incoherent words into her ear. You are incredible, so beautiful. Lena answered him with a quiet, stifled moan, which mixed surprise, long-awaited release, and something primordial, long suppressed. At that moment, everything around her lost its shape. The walls, time, and shadows of memories disappeared. Only he remained hot, alive, close, like a breath on her neck, like the beating of her heart in unison with her own. They reached out to each other greedily, like lost travelers who had found water in the desert. Buttons came off with a light crack, the fabric of their clothes rustled softly, sliding down onto the parquet as if it wanted to disappear itself without interfering with this flash of passion. Everything was swift and awkwardly tender at the same time. Fingers glided over the skin, flaring up with every touch, with every sigh that escaped from the lips. The sun's rays, penetrating through the half-lowered curtains, drew slow shadows on their bodies, like an artist in love with every curve of the line. Lena, barely touching the cool sheet with her back, let out a short, happy laugh. It escaped involuntarily, as if her body recognized what her soul had been waiting for so long. The sheets smelled of cleanliness, the freshness of the morning air, and something new, a beginning, a rebirth. She wrapped her legs around Adam, pulling him closer, closer, as if she could dissolve in him, hiding from everything that was outside. Her skin was burning, every cell responded to his touch, as if awakening from a long sleep. Adam leaned toward her, and their lips met again, deeper now, slower, with the kind of pleasure that comes only to those who have held back their feelings for so long. His palms slid down her sides, lingering on her curves, as if he wanted to memorize every line, every breath. His eyes, deep, brown, looked at her without stopping, and in that look Lena saw more than just desire. There was awe, trepidation, as if he was afraid that this was all a dream that was about to disappear. She ran her fingers down his cheek, feeling the light stubble like sandpaper, so real, so alive. Her hands, as if driven by instinct, dug into his dark, soft hair, reaching out to him, not to let go, not to let this moment end. He was whispering something, muffled, hot words that dissolved into her skin like raindrops. And then time really did disappear. They belonged only to each other, merging in a dance of passion and comfort in which there was no more pain or doubt, just two people, tired, but having found each other. And with every movement, with every breath, Lena felt something blooming inside her anew, not just desire, not just warmth, but life. Later, lying next to her on a rumpled bed, Lena looked at the dark ceiling and tried to catch her breath. Adam settled down side by side, their fingers intertwined. He turned his head slightly towards her. "Are you okay?" he asked quietly. Lena smiled in the darkness, although tears glistened on her eyelashes, but these were not tears of grief, but of some kind of piercing relief. "Yes," she whispered, "probably, for the first time in a long time." He raised himself on his elbow, looking into her face. "Don't you regret it?" She shook her head, running her hand down his cheek. "No, it's just, I'm really scared now." Adam leaned down and touched his lips to her forehead. "Me too. But I'm with you, no matter what happens." Lena pressed herself against him, closing her eyes. She understood that tomorrow reality would fall upon her with double force. But now, at this moment, she wanted to believe only this promise, whispered in the darkness, "I am with you." The following weeks turned into a dream stolen from reality for Lena and Adam. They lived from meeting to meeting like two conspirators. As soon as the opportunity arose, Lena dropped everything and rushed to him, sometimes for an hour at lunch, sometimes after work. Adam rarely appeared in society, awaiting trial, so it was easy to hide in quiet places. They met at the same boutique hotel, sometimes choosing different ones. Adam rented a room under other people's names. A couple of times, when time was short, they simply sat in his car in the underground parking lot, holding hands and talking, while unsuspecting passers-by scurried around. Every touch, every kiss intoxicated Lena more than before. She didn't think that at 40-something years old, she would be able to feel like a young girl in love, with a sinking heart, with a tremor from one glance of her lover. When Adam kissed her wrists or whispered tenderness, she forgot about everything in the world. But reality inexorably set in every time she returned home. Michael was still absorbed in his work. Sometimes Lena experienced attacks of acute guilt, watching him fall asleep over a stack of documents right in the living room. Once his stomach got sick due to nerves, and she, overcoming her shame, fussed around, brewed him herbal tea, stroked his back until the spasms passed. Michael gratefully kissed her hand and joked that she was his guardian angel. Lena smiled in response, but inwardly reproached herself. If only you knew. But as Rivera's trial approached, Michael became increasingly nervous. A week before the trial began, he snapped at Lena for no apparent reason. It happened in the evening, when they were both in the kitchen. She was preparing a light supper. He was leafing through some papers. "Damn it!" Michael suddenly shouted, angrily throwing the folder onto the table. The stack of papers scattered. Lena winced, dropping her spoon. "What happened?" she asked worriedly, watching her husband irritably massage the bridge of his nose. "Those idiots from the investigation department," he muttered through his teeth. "They wasted time, and now they don't have time to attach some of the documents. The judge refused to postpone the hearing. Damn bureaucracy." He kicked the chair. Lena quickly wiped her hands and came closer. "Mike, calm down," she asked softly. "Well, then you can do without these documents. You have enough evidence, right?" Michael shook his head, his anger gradually giving way to a grim weariness. "There's enough evidence. I just can't stand it when someone's negligence can ruin a case. This guy, Rivera, is already doing everything he can." He looked up at his wife. There was anxiety, even fear, in his gaze. Lena understood. He was afraid of losing this case. For him, this was more than just one trial. It was a challenge, ambition, reputation. "You can do it," she said softly, trying to sound confident. "I know you're doing the right thing." Michael smiled sadly and suddenly pulled Lena to him, hugging her tightly. She was taken aback. It had been a long time since he had openly sought her support like this. "I'm sorry," he whispered into her hair. "I know I've been unbearable lately. This damn thing's just worn me out." Lena felt a pang of conscience in her heart. She carefully hugged his back, patting him soothingly. "Everything is fine. I understand." And indeed, she understood Michael now, as she hadn't tried in a long time. He had tortured himself for the sake of principles, and she had betrayed those principles, betrayed him. Tears burned her eyes. Lena blinked quickly, suppressing them. Michael, deciding that she was upset by his outburst, apologized again and even kissed her forehead tenderly. "You're my gold," he said wearily. "You put up with me like this." Lena smiled sadly and pulled away, returning to the stove. Everything inside her screamed, "Tell him, stop before it's too late." But she couldn't. It had gone too far. She loved Adam. Yes, she could already admit it. This wasn't just a fling. She was in love. Madly, forbidden, but irrevocably. To go back would mean breaking her own heart and, perhaps, destroying the hope of another person. A couple of days later, Michael returned home in high spirits. This was unusual. He had been walking around like a thundercloud for the last month, and now he even brought a bouquet of wild flowers for Lena on the way, which was a complete surprise. "Guess what happened?" he said mysteriously as Lena put the flowers in a vase in surprise. His cheeks turned pink like a boy's. "What?" she responded, involuntarily charging herself with his energy. "We had a breakthrough at the preliminary hearing today. Rivera's former CFO agreed to testify against him," Michael blurted out triumphantly. "The bastard thought everyone was in on the scheme, but no, he's the only one willing to make a deal with the investigation to soften his fate." Lena's smile froze. Her heart sank in her chest. The CFO, Adam's right hand. The man who knew all the company's secrets. If he really became a witness for the prosecution, Adam's case was almost hopeless. "Are you sure?" she asked, trying to keep her tone calm. "He's not bluffing to protect himself." "Yes, he will probably shield me, but he will also drown Rivera. Otherwise, they will not give him any leniency." Michael spoke passionately, enthusiastically. After consulting, he decided that it is better to turn in the boss than to sit for 30 years himself. "I have a confidential meeting with him tomorrow. We will record his willingness to cooperate. If everything goes well, by the beginning of the trial, we will have an ace up our sleeve, which the defense will not know about until the last moment." "Oh, so you're keeping it a secret?" Lena asked, swallowing the lump in her throat. Of course, Michael rubbed his hands contentedly. Let Rivera remain in the dark. When his friend comes out on the stand and spills the beans, it will be too late to rush around. Lena nodded mechanically, pretending to listen, but inside, everything was screaming. Warn Adam, it's a trap. Michael, elated by his news, opened up for the first time in a long time over dinner. He recalled how a key witness had gone rogue in a similar case, and how important it was to tread carefully now so that the defense wouldn't catch wind of it. By the way, he remarked casually, you, my love, are not supposed to know about this either. So don't tell anyone, not even your office girlfriends, because it's a small world. Lena smiled bitterly to herself. If you only knew who I could tell. Of course, she answered calmly. She barely slept that night. Michael fell asleep contentedly and peacefully, and Lena lay next to him with her eyes wide open, staring at the dark ceiling. One thought was pulsing in her head: what to do? If Adam is unprepared for the blow, his chances in court are slim. The CFO will likely corroborate the prosecution's version of deliberate fraud. Even if Adam was telling the truth and the collapse was unintentional, the testimony of a former associate will convince the jury otherwise. But to warn Lena, he means to reveal the secret that her husband confided to her. No, not just a secret part of the investigative actions. This is not only moral betrayal, but also a professional crime. She got up at about 4 in the morning, still without sleeping, and went into the bathroom so as not to wake Michael. There, sitting on the edge of the bathtub, Lena typed a message with trembling hands. We need to meet. Urgently. Adam answered almost instantly, as if he had not slept either. What happened? Are you okay? Please find a way to see each other in the morning. It is very important. As soon as she sent it, the bedroom door creaked. Lena quickly hid the phone in her robe pocket. A sleepy Michael appeared on the threshold. Len, why aren't you sleeping? He rubbed his eyes. Everything is fine, she hastened to assure. I just couldn't sleep, so I decided to have some tea. He mumbled something sympathetically and went back to bed. Lena exhaled. The phone vibrated in her pocket. Come to my office by 8 a.m. There will be no one there. Address. She immediately replied, will be. That night, for the first time, she realized that she was finally breaking the law, not only the moral law, but also the legal one. You won't believe how it all ended. Like if you're shocked, Lena will get what she deserves. Every lie has its price, and the payback is near. The real drama is just beginning. Early in the morning, Lena entered the high-rise office building in the business center where Adam's company was headquartered. The security guard at the entrance was dozing and did not even ask for a pass. Apparently, Adam had warned him. The elevator took her to the 20th floor. The doors parted, revealing a spacious hall with a marble floor and a chrome logo, Rivercore Investments. The office was deserted. The clock showed only 7:58. The workday had not yet begun. Adam was waiting for her at the glass doors of the reception area. He opened the door himself, not letting her put her pass to the turnstile. His face was tense. As soon as they stepped inside, Lena felt her knees buckle. The stress of the last few hours was bearing down on her with all its weight. Adam immediately hugged her, supporting her. Darling, what happened? He whispered, stroking her back. You're as pale as a sheet. Lena buried her face in his chest, just listening to his heartbeat for a few moments, gathering strength. Then she exhaled and pulled away. Your former CFO has a meeting with prosecutors today, she blurted out, looking Adam straight in the eye. He's agreed to testify against you, secretly. Adam's face contorted with shock. He turned almost as pale as Lena had a minute earlier. Gerard? He whispered incredulously. This can't be. He swore he didn't know anything. He must have decided to talk for the sake of a deal, Lena said quietly. Michael said he was going to hide it from your lawyers until the very end. He wanted your man to be a surprise at the trial. Adam cursed under his breath, backing away abruptly to the window. He rubbed his face feverishly with his hands. Damn, Gerard Scott, he muttered. So he sold me out, the bastard. Lena stood there, wringing her fingers. Her heart was constricted with pain, seeing Adam's despair. He suddenly turned to her. Thank you for telling me, he said quietly, coming back. Do you realize what you've done? He stopped short, as if he didn't dare voice it. I broke the law, Lena finished bitterly. Yes, I understand. Adam's eyes flashed with so many emotions at once: gratitude, guilt, tenderness. He cupped her face in his hands. For me, Lena, my love. He whispered and kissed her passionately, with a mixture of joy and bitterness. For a few endless seconds, they simply found comfort in each other. Finally, Adam pulled away, frowning. I need to act now. Shit, this meeting is in an hour. He glanced at the clock on the wall. I can try to stop him. Maybe it's not too late. How? Lena was scared. What are you going to do? Adam narrowed his eyes, his features sharpening. He now looked like the predatory businessman the media had painted him as. Don't worry. I have people who can persuade Mr. Scott to reconsider his plans, he said dully. After all, if he gets a signal that I know about his betrayal, he'll panic. Lena went cold. She didn't want anyone to be harmed because of her leak. Adam, don't do anything illegal, she pleaded, squeezing his hand. Please. He sighed, running his hand through her hair. I'll try to avoid extremes, he assured. I have dirt on this guy. I'll remind him about it. Lena nodded, although the anxiety did not let go. The main thing is that Michael doesn't find out that No one will know, Adam said firmly. I promise. I won't tell anyone where I got this information from. He touched her chin with his finger, forcing her to look into his eyes. You risked everything for me. I will never forget that. I couldn't help it, she whispered. I love you. The words escaped her before she had time to think about them. But having said them, Lena realized that they were the absolute truth. Adam's eyes flashed with warmth. I love you, Lena, he answered firmly. We'll get through this, you hear? She buried her face in his shoulder, trying to believe. A quarter of an hour later, Lena was already driving back, trying to make it to the start of the workday. Adam stayed behind to call someone, perhaps lawyers or people from Gerard Scott's past. She didn't ask too many questions, although her heart was not in the right place. That evening, Michael came home looking gloomy. Lena already knew something had happened. She had been holding her phone close all day, waiting for news from Adam. Closer to midday, he sent a short. Scott didn't show up for the meeting. He must have run away. Now, seeing her husband's tired, angry face, Lena prepared for the storm. Can you imagine? The bastard didn't show up. Michael snapped, without even saying hello. That damn Scott ran away. They're sure he ran away from the city. No one can find him. He threw the folder he had brought from work onto the sofa and walked nervously around the living room. How did he escape? Lena asked carefully, trying to put as much surprise into her voice as possible. And so, Michael flared up, pulling off his tie. He was supposed to show up with a lawyer to sign a cooperation agreement, and then he disappeared. He's not home. His phone is off. Our guys suspect that he was either intimidated or chickened out. Lena sat on the edge of the chair, feigning concern. Do you think the defense found out? Michael stopped and stared at her. That's what pisses me off, he said, lowering his voice to a dangerous hoarseness. Someone blabbed, otherwise how would Rivera know? Or he has a nose like a dog. There was a case in the organized crime department where an informant was found dead in a ditch on the day of a deal. I wouldn't be surprised if these thugs of Rivera's are from the same school. Lena went cold. He didn't rule out the worst option. Oh God, I hope nothing happens to Scott, she breathed out. You found time to worry about a thief, Michael snapped and suddenly added, Sorry, I'm not talking about you. It's just that months of work have been ruined. He fell onto the sofa and buried his face in his palms. Michael. Lena came up to him, timidly putting her hand on his shoulder. Maybe we can win without him. You still have evidence. The husband raised his head. His eyes were tired, but still glowing with determination. We'll try. It's too late to retreat. Tomorrow is jury selection, and then it'll all start." He paused, then added bitterly, "Only I'm a fool to myself. I shouldn't have hidden it, but should have immediately formalized his defense and taken testimony officially. But I wanted a spectacular surprise, so I played myself out." Michael looked so disappointed and lost that Lena's heart sank for a moment. Was it her fault that he was suffering now? Of course. But another voice immediately objected. He is suffering for a cause, and Adam could lose his freedom because of her betrayal of her husband. Michael barely slept that night, preparing an urgently updated strategy without a witness. Lena heard him calling a colleague at 3 a.m. to discuss the possibility of postponing the trial, but the judge refused. In this feverish preparation for battle, she was just a shadow that knew much more than the others, but could no longer change anything. Everything was heading towards the denouement, and Lena could only hope that her personal choice would not be in vain. Courtroom 14 of the San Francisco Circuit Court was packed. The case of State v. Rivera had drawn the attention of the press and the public, with reporters filling their designated seats and citizens lining up since dawn to get into the hearing. Lena was not present in the hall. She did not dare to show her face there. But every morning she began with an anxious glance at her watch. Now Michael and Adam would find themselves opposite each other, each with their own truth. Whose side would Themis take? She followed the trial through news reports and the occasional text from Adam. He couldn't write much. The judge had banned the defendant from using his phone during court hearings. But late at night, they would whisper into the phone, discussing the day. Michael, she knew, had made a strong case, albeit without the killer asset of a fugitive witness. Prosecutors presented the jury with numerous financial documents, account statements, and testimony from investors who had lost money. Lena knew the names: Stuart Coles, a retiree from Oklahoma who had tearfully recounted how he had invested his entire life savings in Rivera's company and was left with nothing; Gina Harrigan, a single mother who had believed the promises of doubling her capital and was now working 2 jobs. There were many like him, and each story struck Adam like a heavy hammer in the eyes of the jury. Michael interrogated each victim carefully and respectfully, allowing people to speak out. Single mother Gina Harrigan came to the podium, nervously fiddling with the hem of her simple dress, her eyes full of fear as she looked around the room. Michael asked her a few leading questions in a soft tone. "Tell me, Mrs. Harrigan, why did you decide to invest money in the defendant's company?" The woman swallowed, her voice shaking. I read about Mr. Rivera in the papers. They wrote that he was such a successful investor, helping ordinary people get rich. I have a son growing up. I wanted to save up for his college." Gina's voice broke. She quickly wiped away her tears. "I'm sorry." "It's okay, don't rush," Michael said softly, casting a serious glance at the jury. "You trusted Mr. Rivera with your savings?" "Yes," the witness nodded. "All I had was $10,000 in insurance payments after my husband's death. I was hoping. He promised that in a year there would be 20,000. That would be enough for my boy's education." "He promised to double the amount in a year?" Michael asked. "Exactly," Gina answered firmly, remembering. "He personally said at the seminar that he guarantees at least a 2-fold increase in investments." There was a gasp in the room. Michael nodded, indicating that the surprise was justified. "What happened to your money in the end?" The woman covered her face with her hands for a moment. "They were gone," she whispered. "A year and a half later, the company collapsed. I never got a cent back." "Thank you, Mrs. Harrigan." Michael bowed his head sympathetically. "We understand your pain." He turned to the judge. "I have no more questions for this witness." The defense moved to cross-examination. Rivera's lawyer, a well-groomed man named Mark Hanley, stood up, wearing a deliberately friendly smile. "Mrs. Harrigan, my condolences on your loss," he began, spreading his hands. "Tell me, when you decided to invest, did you understand that any investment is a risk?" "Well, yes, but—" "Please answer yes or no," Mark interrupted gently. "Were you aware of the risk?" I knew, but I thought everything was safe there, she muttered. Did anyone give you legal guarantees of doubling the amount? Was there a guaranteed profit written in the contract? The lawyer squinted. Gina blinked, remembering. In the contract, there were some conditions in small print. So no one officially guaranteed you an income. The defense attorney insisted. Objection. Michael's clear voice rang out. The lawyer is pressuring the witness and taking phrases out of context. Protest overruled. The judge looked at Gina. Witness, answer the question to the point. Gina clasped her hands. No, they didn't write any guarantees. But he promised. Unfortunately, promises made at a seminar are not legally binding, the defense attorney said, throwing up his hands as he addressed the jury. I'm very sorry that your expectations were not met, ma'am. But is it Mr. Rivera's fault that the market collapsed? He lost his investment, too. He knew, Gina suddenly blurted out, clenching her fists. He knew everything was going to hell, and he kept accepting money. Mark Hanley clicked his tongue. How do you know Mr. Rivera knew anything? The witness fell silent, confused. You don't know, do you? The lawyer raised his eyebrows. No more questions. Gina hung her head. She was called only to show her grief, but the defense managed to sow doubt. Was the company to blame if the market itself collapsed? Michael understood the jury's thinking, but he still had some trump cards ahead. He later called as a witness Lauren Whitaker, a woman who had once been in a relationship with Rivera and had also lost money. Her appearance caused a wave of whispers, an attractive blonde in her 30s, clearly nervous but determined. Miss Whitaker, Michael began after establishing his identity, are you acquainted with the defendant? Yes, Lauren answered, avoiding looking in Adam's direction. We dated for about a year before his firm went bankrupt. Do you confirm that during your relationship you invested a large sum in Mr. Rivera's company? The defense attorney stood up abruptly. Objection, Your Honor, this is beyond the scope of the case and is of a purely personal nature. Your Honor, Michael said, this evidence will demonstrate the defendant's conduct and his attitude toward the investors whose trust he exploited. The judge frowned. I will allow the interrogation, but I will ask the prosecutor not to delve into personal details longer than necessary. Michael nodded and repeated the question. So, you invested money in the defendant's company while you were in a relationship with him? Yes, Lauren said firmly. He convinced me to invest. He said it would strengthen our future. How much did you invest? $100,000, she answered clearly. The room erupted in surprised exclamations. I object. The defense attorney stood up again. The witness was not declared by the victim, and her contribution does not figure in the indictment. Go on, the judge said briefly to the prosecutor. Michael leaned closer to the jury, lowering his voice to create an atmosphere of trust. What happened to that money, Miss Whitaker? Lauren took a deep breath, her lips trembling. They disappeared with the others. After the crash, Adam, I'm sorry, Mr. Rivera, he said we'd get through this together, but he dumped me a month later. For what reason? Michael asked quietly. The witness's eyes filled with tears. He said that I was boring him, and later I learned from mutual friends that he already had a new passion. Several people in the jury row shook their heads. Michael felt the indignation rising. Tell me, he said, if it weren't for your personal relationship, would you have invested such a sum? Lauren shook her head. No, of course not. I trusted him as a man. I thought he cared about our future. Lena, listening to this interrogation, covered her face with her hands. She alone knew how accurately Lauren described what Lena herself had experienced. It sounded like a death sentence. Adam Rivera was using love and trust for selfish purposes. Thank you, Miss Whitaker. I have no more questions. Michael's voice sounded firm. The witness could not resist, and, looking straight at Adam, asked loudly through her tears, Why did you do this to me, Adam? Doesn't love mean anything to you? I object, the defense attorney jumped up. An emotional outburst is irrelevant to the case. The judge banged his gavel several times. Objection sustained. Jurors, you are to ignore the last question. I'm sorry, Lauren whispered, covering her face with her hands. The judge called a recess to allow the witness to recover. These episodes did not provide direct evidence of fraud, but they created an emotional background. The defendant looked like an unprincipled deceiver not only in business, but also in feelings. The jury looked at Riviera with obvious condemnation, and Michael felt that his strategy was working. They make me out to be the devil in human form, Adam told Lena bitterly one night, as if I had deliberately dreamed of ruining these people. Hang in there, honey, she whispered into the phone, trying to reassure him. Your lawyer will be representing you too, right? The defense, according to Adam, chose the line. Rivera did not know about the impending collapse, lost money himself, and became a victim of a coincidence. Adam's team of lawyers, hired for fabulous fees, worked in unison. They aggressively questioned each victim, hinting that they themselves were greedy and looking for easy money. Some witnesses got confused, admitting that they signed contracts that indicated the risks. Michael was not far behind. Lena had seen him on the news. He was smart, tough, literally smashing the defense's financial expert during a cross-examination, catching him in contradictions. In her husband's eyes, she read weariness, but also fanatical determination. In the third week of the trial, Adam decided to testify in person. His lawyers were against it. It was risky, because the prosecutor would have a chance to corner the defendant. But Adam insisted. He wanted to look the jury in the eye and tell his story. Lena found out about it the morning before his appearance. Adam called her before entering the court. I have to, Lena, he said firmly into the phone. I have nothing to hide. I'll tell them the truth, how it all happened. Lena trembled for him. She knew Michael would set a trap for cross-examination. And sure enough, the news was boiling that evening. Hot day in court, Rivera testifies. Commentators discussed the clash between Rivera and District Attorney Sterling. Late at night, without waiting for a call, Lena dialed Adam herself. He didn't answer right away. You could tell from his voice how exhausted he was. Darling, what happened? Lena whispered. Sorry, they said it would be better for me not to talk to the press today, and he hesitated. I'm not the press, she said softly. I know, he sighed heavily. It was hell. Your husband is an executioner like no other in the world. Lena squeezed the phone. She simultaneously felt bad for Adam and strangely, bitterly, flattered for Michael. He really was a master of his craft. What happened? She asked. He caught me in the details. Adam smiled bitterly. He asked me meticulously about some letters from 3 years ago, emphasizing that I bought the house with investors' money, although I had the right to take dividends. But in his mouth, I looked like a scoundrel who filled his pockets before the collapse. And then he pulled out his trump card. Which one? Lena's heart sank. I found a woman, one of the investors, he answered wearily. Well, we had a brief affair once, before everything. Michael dragged her onto the stand, and she cried about how I cheated her trust in everything hinting at both money and feelings. Lena closed her eyes. It was as if Michael was deliberately looking for a parallel, consciously or not, with their situation. A woman deceived by Rivera both financially and emotionally. The jury obviously loved it, Adam continued quietly. I saw their faces. Shit. Don't say that, Lena asked. Nothing has been decided yet. It's decided, he said dully. Tomorrow's the debate, and then their verdict. I'm sure they hate me. Lena prayed all night, even though she was not a particularly religious person. It seemed to her that just a little more and her heart would not withstand this tension. The jury retired to deliberate at noon the following day. They returned less than 5 hours later. The verdict was reached suspiciously quickly for such a complex case. Lena, unable to find a place for herself, watched the live broadcast on the city channel. Her hands were shaking. On the first count of fraud on an especially large scale, we, the jury, find the defendant Adam Rivera not guilty. Lena gasped and covered her mouth with her hand. In the frame, she saw Adam close his eyes, barely audibly exhaling, and next to him, his lawyer joyfully shook his fist. On the second point of the charge money laundering, we find him not guilty. Tears poured from Lena's eyes. It was a miracle. Despite everything, the jury did not find the evidence sufficient to put him in jail. Michael stood stone-faced on the screen. Losing such a case in front of all the cameras was torture for a man of his pride. Lena could almost physically feel how it was destroying him from the inside. The final count's conspiracy, forgery also sounded not guilty. The judge declared Rivera free, lifting the bail restrictions. The courtroom buzzed, and some of the audience gasped in disappointment. Someone shouted, "Shame." Lena didn't notice how she fell to her knees in front of the TV, sobbing with relief. Her Adam was free. All the sacrifices, all the risks were not in vain. The phone vibrated, a message from Adam. "Free, love you." She screamed through her tears and pressed the device to her chest. However, the joy was quickly overshadowed by a heavy thought. What would happen to Michael now? He had suffered a resounding failure. He could be accused of unprofessionalism, of having missed the criminal, and public opinion considered Rivera to be exactly that. In the evening, hearing the noise of a car approaching, Lena wiped her face and tried to pull herself together. She needed to talk to her husband. But Michael didn't show up home that evening or the next day. She called him, no answer. She learned from colleagues that he had taken sick leave. Where he was, she didn't know. Lena wrote to Adam every hour. He was planning to leave town for a couple of weeks, to wait out the media storm somewhere on a ranch in Nevada that belonged to a friend of his. He invited Lena to come with him. "Come with me," he begged over the phone. "There's no point in you staying there. It's over." Lena hesitated. It seemed she needed to see Michael to find out everything. She still hoped to save the fragments of the family, although she knew deep down there would be no forgiveness. On the third day after the verdict, Michael showed up. He returned late in the evening, when Lena, worried, had already called the hospitals. Hearing the front door open, she rushed into the hall. The husband looked like he had aged 10 years. He was unshaven, his eyes were red, and he reeked of whiskey. He was holding a copy of the newspaper. Lena rushed towards him. "Michael, God, where have you been? I was worried." He looked at her in such a way that she stumbled. There was not a single warm spark in his eyes, only cold and something very alien. "Were you worried?" he asked again, his voice slightly slurred. "Well, yes, very touching." Lena froze. Michael had never smelled so much alcohol before. He threw the newspaper down on the nightstand with a slam. Lena caught a headline out of the corner of her eye. "Prosecutor Sterling loses Rivera case. A fraudster's triumph." Under the headline was a photo. Michael outside the courthouse, his face frozen, and behind him, a jubilant Adam surrounded by lawyers. "Mike," she began cautiously. "Come on, sit down. Let's talk." "About what?" he suddenly exploded, clenching his fists. "About how I ruined my perfect career, or about my wife?" He stopped short, glaring at Lena. Lena's heart sank. He knows. She took a step back without noticing. "Michael, let me explain," she began, but he interrupted her, breaking into a shout. "Shut up," she recoiled. Michael had never raised his voice at her, even in arguments. But now he was out of his mind. You ruined everything," he croaked, barely holding back. "Do you think I'm an idiot, that I can't see the obvious?" "What do you mean?" Lena tried to speak firmly, but her voice trembled. Michael took a sharp step towards her, grabbing her shoulder. She cried out in pain as his fingers dug through the fabric. "Don't pretend," he said through clenched teeth. "When that bastard suddenly started knowing everything in advance about Scott, about our evidence, I didn't want to believe it then. I thought it was a leak through the office. And then," he grimaced, "I remembered your eyes. Every time I talked about the case, you looked so guilty." Lena shook her head, tears flowing from her eyes. "Michael, no." "Yes," he shouted right in her face. "Yes, damn it. You're the one who stabbed me in the back. He pushed her away as if he couldn't bear the touch. Lena hit the wall, but felt no pain, only a chilling horror. "Are you sleeping with him?" Michael suddenly said quietly. This hoarse, quiet tone was more frightening than a scream. Lena couldn't lie, and it was useless. He already understood everything. She just covered her face with her hands, sobbing. Michael slammed his fist into the door frame so hard the wood cracked. "Damn bitch," he muttered. "My own wife is a woman of easy virtue with a criminal." Lena raised her head, choking on air. The rude word stung. She tried to get closer to her husband, but he recoiled as if from a leper. "I'm sorry," she stammered. "I didn't mean to. It was all an accident." "Accidentally lay down under the bastard I was trying to put in jail." Michael grinned evilly. "Bravo, Lena. You exceeded my wildest expectations." Lena was sobbing, unable to find words. She tried to touch his hand, but Michael jerked away. "Don't touch me," he hissed. "You make me sick." She groaned at these words as if he had hit her. Michael swayed, the alcohol taking its toll, and sat down on the couch, his head in his hands. For a while, there was deathly silence, broken only by Lena's sobs. Finally, he slowly raised his head. His gaze became deathly calm, and this frightened her even more. "Tomorrow you're getting out of here," he said quietly, deliberately. "I've already contacted a lawyer for a divorce. We'll divide all the property as it should be." Lena tried to object through tears. "Michael, please, don't rush into things. Give me a chance." He smiled almost pityingly. "A chance? For you? Or for us?" He shook his head. "No, Lena. That's it. The end." There was such heaviness in his voice that she knew it was useless. Something had died in him. "How could it be? 12 years of marriage," she whispered, wiping her wet face. "You loved me, didn't you?" Michael was silent. Then he said slowly, "The woman I loved died. Or she never existed, I don't know." Lena fell to her knees, sobbing loudly. "Forgive me. Lord, Mike, forgive me. I forgot who I am, what I was doing. It was a mistake." He looked down at her with a dull gaze. "A mistake? No. A conscious choice," he snapped. "You betrayed me and the law too." He stood up unsteadily and walked towards the exit. Lena grabbed his sleeve in panic. "Where are you going? Stop, please. We will discuss everything. Fix it." Michael pulled his hand away, disgust flashing in his eyes. "There's no longer an us between us." He rummaged in his pocket and threw a bunch of keys on the floor in front of her. "Here, tomorrow, when I'm sober, pack your things. And here's some advice. Don't dare show up in my life again." The door slammed. Lena was left lying on the hallway floor, writhing in sobs. It was all over. Lena packed her suitcase and left the next day as Michael had ordered. Only Max remained in the empty house, whining in confusion at the door. Michael had not allowed her to take the dog. Saying goodbye to him, Lena burst into tears again. For several weeks, she lived as if in a fog. She stayed with a school friend who temporarily sheltered her in her small apartment. She did not ask unnecessary questions, only sighed sympathetically, seeing Lena's condition. The divorce was finalized quickly and with virtually no communication. Michael, through lawyers, transferred her share of their joint savings and insisted on signing non-disclosure papers. Apparently, he was afraid of the scandal leaking out. Lena signed everything mechanically, feeling that she deserved any humiliation. Rumors did leak out to the press, with one tabloid hinting at the district attorney's family problems amid the failed trial. But no names or details followed. Michael had suppressed the scandal for the sake of his own reputation, and Lena was grateful for that, at least. Lena left the law firm at her own request. She no longer had the strength to go to the office and pretend that life was normal. Her colleagues whispered, watching her with sad glances. Everyone saw her haggard appearance and understood that Mrs. Sterling had a personal drama. Adam called her every day. After the divorce, he tried to persuade her to meet, but Lena hesitated for a long time. Her soul was torn apart by contradictions. On the one hand, only in Adam's voice did she find consolation. On the other hand, as soon as she remembered what their love had cost her, a wave of bitterness, even anger, rolled over her. He invited her to his penthouse in the center for the first time since the trial they were to see each other in person. Lena arrived in the evening. As soon as the door closed, Adam pulled her into a hot kiss. "Finally, you're with me," he whispered, kissing her face and hair. "It's all over. Now we're free." Lena responded to the embrace, but her feelings were confused. Yes, they were free, but at what cost? Adam noticed her tension. "Is something wrong?" he asked warily, looking into her eyes. Lena stepped back and walked into the living room. The luxurious interior, the panoramic windows, she would have been impressed by this view before. Now she didn't care. "I've ruined my life," she said quietly, standing with her back to him and looking at the lights of the evening city through the glass. "Michael, he hates me. My career is in shambles." Adam came up from behind and put his arm around her shoulders. "You knew what you were getting into," he said carefully. "For our love, isn't it worth it?" Lena closed her eyes. "Love," she repeated dully. "Adam, are you sure you love, or was it a game?" He turned her sharply towards him. "How can you ask such a thing?" He was offended. "I threw myself into this feeling, risking no less than you." She smiled sadly. "No less? You are free, justified. You have plenty of money and opportunities again, and I have nothing. You have me," he said firmly. They looked at each other in silence for a while. Lena tried to see the old sincerity in his eyes, but she thought she saw a glimmer of cold calculation. Maybe these were fears and projections. She didn't know herself. "Come with me," Adam said suddenly, softening. "Let's leave this city. I have the means. We can start over anywhere. That's what you wanted, isn't it?" Once upon a time, yes, she dreamed of throwing everything away and being only with him. But now, "I don't know," Lena whispered. "I'm confused." Adam let go of her and walked to the bar, pouring himself a whiskey. He seemed to be trying to contain his irritation. "What is there to know?" he said, draining his glass in one gulp. "Your old world is destroyed. Our world is here." "Ours?" Lena slouched in her chair, feeling tired. "Adam, be honest. You." She plucked up her courage and voiced the fear that was gnawing at her. "You knew who I was from the start. You deliberately got close to me to gain an advantage in the matter." Adam froze with the bottle in his hand. His face turned white. "Damn, Lena," he exhaled. "How can you think that?" "Answer me," she repeated firmly, feeling her heart pounding. "Before we go any further, I need to know." Adam hesitated for a split second too long. Lena knew before he spoke. "Yes, I recognized you then at the bookstore," he said hoarsely. "I saw you by chance and decided to talk. But then everything was real, I swear." Lena covered her mouth with her hand, stifling a moan. Her chest was burned by a red-hot rod. So her whole fairy tale began with a lie and calculation. "Listen." Adam took a step towards her, but she raised her hand, stopping him. "Don't come any closer." She stood up, swaying, her vision swimming. "Lena, my dear, why cling to the past?" he pleaded. "Yes, I was purposefully looking for a meeting, but real feelings arose. Didn't you feel it?" Lena was silent. Tears were running down her cheeks, but not from self-pity, but from anger, disgust, disappointment. "You used me," she said quietly, "from the first day until the last. Maybe you even fueled this love, so that I—" Her voice broke. "So that I would betray my husband, yes? Become your secret weapon?" "No." Adam flared up, his patience snapping. "Do you think I'm that easy to manipulate? I really am in love. What the hell do I have to prove to you?" He poured himself another drink, his hand visibly shaking. Lena watched as if from the side. Here he was, the man for whom she had destroyed everything she valued. And this man himself had built a trap into which she had fallen, like a stupid girl. Suddenly, she was overcome with furious contempt both for him and for herself. "Prove it." Lena smiled wryly through her tears. Nothing is needed anymore. I understand everything. She snatched an envelope from her purse, part of the money transferred to her after the divorce. A significant amount, but all that remained from her former life. With a sharp movement, Lena threw the envelope on the table in front of the stunned Adam. Here, she said coldly, this is what you needed, right? Money, freedom. Congratulations, you got it all. And you bought and broke me too. Take the rest of the money too. Consider it payment for the lesson. Adam glanced at the envelope, then at her, his expression changing from surprise to fury. What nonsense are you talking about? He hissed. Take your money. He grabbed the envelope and tried to push it back to her, but Lena recoiled as if from poison. Don't you dare come near, she shouted in a broken voice. Adam froze. Their eyes met and became strangers. Oh, really? He hissed. So, after everything I've been through, you're making a monster out of me. I would have rotted in prison if it weren't for you. Do you think it doesn't hurt me that this happened? Are you in pain? Lena laughed hysterically. At least you have your life ahead of you, and who am I now? No husband, no lawyer, no reputation. Nobody. It was your choice, Adam said crisply. I didn't drag you here by force. Lena froze, as if she had been slapped. He was right, and yet how cruel it sounded coming from his lips. Yes, mine, she echoed. My fault. She turned around and walked towards the exit until the last of her pride left her completely. Adam rushed after him. Where are you going? Wait. He grabbed her by the elbow. Let go, she said wearily. It's over. He blinked in confusion, not believing it. So, how is it over? Are you leaving me? Lena closed her eyes. The hysteria subsided, leaving a surprising emptiness inside. I abandoned myself a long time ago, she answered quietly. I'm sorry, Adam, but I have no feelings left. They burned out. He slowly unclenched his fingers. She left, carefully closing the door behind her. Lena stopped on the stairs, trying to stop shaking. Everything she had painstakingly built on the ruins of the past had collapsed again. Now there was no one left around. Over the next few months, Lena existed as a ghost. She rented a tiny apartment on the outskirts of town and got by with odd jobs as a freelance lawyer. Fortunately, she had no official record of wrongdoing. Michael had apparently preferred silence to scandal. But the silence was worse. No calls, no friends, everyone distanced themselves, sensing a scandal. Lena sank into a deep depression. There were days when she didn't get out of bed. Thoughts of suicide crept up on her more and more often, but something, perhaps stubbornness, prevented her from taking the final step. Late one evening, Lena sat on the floor of her tiny bathroom. In front of her lay a bottle of sleeping pills, the remains of one she had once been prescribed for insomnia. Her hand mechanically unscrewed the cap. All she had to do was stretch out her hand, and it would all be over. The pain, the shame, the loneliness. She poured a handful of white capsules into her palm and looked at them for a long time through a veil of tears. Life is irrevocably broken. Why continue this painful path? No one loves her. No one is waiting for her. There will be no one to even mourn. Her hand was shaking. Lena brought the bitter pills to her lips. Suddenly, children's laughter was heard from the street, ringing, joyful. She shuddered, frozen. Through the slightly open window came the voices of the neighboring children, playing in the yard even at this late hour. Someone's mother called out, "Time to go home," and the children loudly protested, bargaining for another 5 minutes. Lena slowly lowered her hand, looking at the floor. She remembered Gina Harrigan with her little son. If she gave in now, left, who would help people like Gina? After all, Lena could ease their grief at least a little bit, she was convinced of that. The pills slipped from her palm and scattered across the tiles. Lena burst into tears, but not from hopelessness, but from determination breaking through the darkness. No, death was too easy a way out for her. She had to live, suffer, fight, do at least something good to justify her existence. That night, for the first time in a long time, she fell asleep without sleeping pills, having cried out all her tears. The next day, Lena saw the same single mother who testified at Rivera's trial, Gina Harrigan, on the street. The woman was standing at the supermarket with her son, and the boy was asking her to buy a toy, but the mother was shrugging her shoulders. She had no money. Lena recognized her immediately. Her heart sank with shame. She remembered that she was the reason Gina did not get justice. The next day, Lena withdrew a couple $1,000s from the account, almost all that was left, and anonymously sent Gina an envelope with cash, having found out her address. This will not correct the common evil, but at least somehow make life easier for this family. For the first time in a long time, Lena felt a little better. She hadn't returned someone else's money from Rivera's scam, but she could at least help those who suffered. Thus began her journey to redemption. Lena got a job as a consultant at a small charity helping victims of fraud. The pay was nominal, but she felt her experience could be useful here. Years passed. Lena heard almost nothing about Michael. She only knew that he had moved to another city and continued his career, although without the former brilliance. Information about Adam occasionally appeared in the news. He had gone abroad, opened a new business. Their paths no longer crossed. Every day, waking up in her modest apartment, Lena felt lonely. No one forgave her, neither her husband, nor society, nor herself. But at least she tried to live on and do small good deeds as much as she could. She learned to get up in the morning without tears, drink cheap coffee, and go to the office, where people with broken lives were waiting for her, helping them to file a complaint or advising them on how to return what was stolen. Lena gradually healed her own wounded soul. 5 years passed. Lena tore off another calendar page. She turned 47. I'm holding up pretty well, she thought with bitter irony, looking at the first silver threads at her temples in the mirror. Her eyes no longer had the same liveliness, but they had the resilience of someone who had survived a storm and not broken to the end. She didn't know that fate was preparing her final test, a meeting from which she had been running in her thoughts for so many years. Michael stood in the wind at the edge of the cliff and watched the ocean crashing against the rocks far below, the vast Pacific Ocean stretching out before his eyes, and San Francisco and all its ghosts 10 miles behind him. It had been 3 days since Adam Rivera's acquittal. 3 days since his career and family had been destroyed. Michael had left town that first night, blindly driving south on Highway 1 until he ran out of gas somewhere near Big Sur. There, amid the wilderness and steep cliffs, he had hoped to stifle the storm tearing at his soul. A strong gust of wind almost blew his old baseball cap off his head. Michael caught it, mechanically pulling it tighter, squinting from the salty spray coming from below. His head was pounding with the throbbing pain of a hangover. He had spent the entire previous night sitting by a fire on a deserted beach, draining almost an entire bottle of whiskey. The burning of the alcohol did not quench the torment, but at least it dulled it a little. Lena's face kept appearing before his inner eye, not the one she was on his last evening at home, but the old, beloved one. Here she is, laughing loudly, throwing her head back, when he tickles her in bed early in the morning. Here she is kissing him in her prosecutor's robe after his first victory in a jury trial. And here she is, sobbing on her knees, begging for forgiveness. Michael squeezed his eyes shut, running his palms across his face as if trying to erase the images. The tears didn't come, they were driven out by the black anger that had been seething inside him ever since he realized his wife had cheated on him with his enemy. He trusted her as he trusted himself. He had never even thought that Lena was capable of betrayal, and that made the feeling of a knife in his back even more painful. Yes, he had been absorbed in work, had neglected their relationship. He was aware of that now. But was that an excuse? No. Not a single circumstance could justify her destroying everything he believed in. Michael himself insisted that she leave without scandals. He could not bear to share the living space for another day. The official version for those around him, they separated peacefully due to family circumstances. But inside him, every hour, one word rang: betrayal, betrayal, betrayal. The wind lashed harder, throwing cold drops into his face. Michael stepped to the very edge. Foam swirled below, beckoning with a black abyss. For a moment, there was a temptation to take a step forward, to stop everything at once. The pain, the shame of a lost cause, the lonely awakenings without a goal. He imagined himself flying down into the roaring darkness and suddenly caught himself thinking, "Will Lena cry at my funeral?" Probably not, she still had Rivera. At that moment, something snapped in Michael and then contracted again, creating a new, chilling anger. He turned away from the edge, breathing heavily. No, death was too easy a way out. It was not his path. He lived by the principle of responsibility. Once everything had collapsed, he must not run away, but rise up and continue to work in spite of it. The first thing he would do was clear his name as a professional. The lost case had damaged his reputation, but not destroyed it. A week later, Michael was sitting in the office of the district attorney of a neighboring county thanks to his old connections. He had been given the chance to head the general crimes unit. It was a demotion, but he accepted it without protest, to earn his fame anew from scratch. He swore off thinking about family. He filed for divorce, did everything through lawyers so as not to see Lena. Only once, returning to his old job for boxes of personal belongings, he ran into his old boss, who sympathetically patted him on the shoulder. "Hang in there, Mike. Everyone knows you did what you could. Sometimes juries make mistakes." Michael put on a polite face, but only chuckled to himself. Yes, the jury was wrong about who should have been judged. It was then that the first vengeful thought flashed through his mind. What if he took Lena and brought her to justice under the law? There was no evidence of her leaking then, and he wasn't looking for it. The wound was too fresh. But time passed, the anger did not subside, it only hardened into a cold lump of determination. A year after the divorce, Michael put together everything that could point to Lena's role in the collapse of the Rivera case. With the support of a couple of influential colleagues, he quietly initiated an investigation. They raised telephone billing records, interviewed witnesses again. Rivera's former financial director, eventually found by the FBI in Florida, testified during interrogation that someone warned him about the prosecutor's interest. The call was anonymous. Of course, there was no direct evidence against Lena, but indirectly everything came together. The prosecutor's wife called the defendant the night before the witness fled. By that time, Michael was already working in another state, but his connections were enough for his information to be accepted. However, no one wanted to open a case. There was no political interest in reviving an old story. Michael resigned himself almost. He buried himself in work, mercilessly dealing with any criminals that came his way. Over the course of several years, he earned a reputation as a tough and uncompromising prosecutor. The press called him Bulldog, ironically mocking his former stardom. They said that Sterling had previously strived for fame, but now he was simply doing his job, giving no quarter to anyone. And Michael was fine with that. Let them fear him. Let them respect him. He no longer needed love. 5 years later, fate unexpectedly gave him a chance to finish the old case. The new San Francisco district attorney wanted to prove himself as a fighter against corruption and decided to spin a story about a leak of information from the previous prosecutor's office, so Lena's case resurfaced. Michael was invited to join the investigation team as a person familiar with the details. He agreed without hesitation. When the indictment for Elena Sterling landed on his desk, Michael stared at the dry lines for a long time. He was not particularly pleased, but rather coldly satisfied. Justice would catch up with the guilty. Late, but still. And now, standing in the courtroom opposite her, all he could think about was not flinching or showing emotion. The woman he saw now was a defendant, nothing more. He had made sure she was put on trial, and he would see it through to the end. What did he feel when he first met her gaze after all these years? Honestly, almost nothing. Emptiness, like looking at an old photograph, a familiar face, but no longer evoking a response. Love had died, and with it, the person he had been. Michael turned his back on the raging ocean and walked slowly toward his parked car. A new life awaited him without Lena, without pain. A life he would build anew, step by step, no matter how hopeless it seemed now. The courtroom was almost empty. The case did not attract a large public. The usual procedure, routine for the chronicles. The defendant was accused of obstructing justice in an old case. Lena sat in the dock and tried to breathe evenly. She was wearing a simple gray suit, her hair pulled back into a bun. Her hands were clasped so that no one would notice her slight trembling. She hadn't seen Michael once in 5 years, and now he was sitting a few meters away from her, at the prosecutor's desk. Again, opposite her, but this time in reality, not in nightmares. He had changed. He had grown older, his hair had turned gray at the temples. His features had become sharper, his gaze had become prickly and cold. Lena didn't know the details, but she had heard. After the scandal 5 years ago, Michael had left and worked in another state for several years. Now he had returned, and it was as if fate had brought them together in this little trial. She didn't know what he thought when he saw the name of the accused. Perhaps it was his initiative to bring the leaked information episode in the Rivera case to trial. Perhaps he had managed to reopen the investigation when he got a new job. Lena allowed it. Michael could consider it a matter of honor to punish her, since he hadn't done it in his time. The judge entered the protocol data, routinely listing the charges. Lena heard the words as if in a fog. Elena Sterling is charged with conspiracy to obstruct justice. She glanced at the prosecutor. Michael had risen to present his case. He was dressed impeccably, smart, confident. He looked much the same as he had at the height of his career. Only his eyes. His eyes were empty, without the warm sparkle she remembered from home. "Your Honor," came his familiar but distantly official voice. "The prosecution does not intend to go into emotional aspects. We will present the facts. 5 years ago, the defendant, using her position, passed confidential information to a defendant in a criminal case, which led to the failure of the trial. Today, having all the necessary evidence, we are moving to find her guilty. Not a single unnecessary word, not a hint of their common past." Lena looked at her ex-husband, and her heart ached. He spoke of her as if she were a stranger, even worse, as if she were a lawbreaker whom he despised. Her lawyer objected to something about the expiration of the statute of limitations, about the absence of direct damage. The judge listened absent-mindedly. The case was clearly predetermined by agreement. Lena agreed to a special procedure, essentially admitting guilt, hoping for mitigation. She was not arrested before the verdict. She appeared in court under a written undertaking. The judge, an elderly man with kind, tired eyes, finally asked, "Does the defendant wish to say anything before the court retires to consider its verdict?" Lena stood up. Her knees trembled, but she pulled herself together. The sentence didn't depend on what she said now. It had already been agreed upon, probably a suspended sentence. But it was important for her to say it for herself. "Your Honor," her voice was surprisingly firm. "5 years ago, I committed an unforgivable act. I broke the law and betrayed the trust of both a professional and my loved ones. No words can justify me. All I can do is sincerely repent." She took a breath and continued, "I have tried to live these years, understanding the gravity of what I did. Every day I regret what happened. Today I am ready to bear the punishment. Perhaps this will be the end of a long path of atonement for me." Her voice shook on the last words, but she exhaled, maintaining her composure. The judge nodded, thanking her for her honesty, and called a recess for the verdict. Lena sat down. Silence reigned in the hall, broken only by the rustling of papers. Michael was writing something down, not looking at her even once. 10 minutes later, the judge returned and announced the sentence: 3 years suspended imprisonment with probation and the loss of her license to practice law. In fact, that was the minimum her defense had hoped for. "Elena Sterling," the judge addressed him directly, "you have been found guilty. The court, taking into account your remorse and the absence of other violations, considers it possible to impose a suspended sentence. I hope you will use this chance to finally get on the right path." Lena nodded, barely holding back tears of gratitude. "Thank you, Your Honor." The gavel struck, ending the meeting. Lena stood up mechanically. That's it. A conviction is a stigma on life, but there will be no prison. She will be able to continue helping people, although not as a lawyer. There was almost no one left in the room, only office workers collecting documents. Michael was folding a folder, preparing to leave. Lena didn't want their last meeting to go like this, without a single word. Maybe there wouldn't be another chance. She approached him timidly, her heart trying to jump out of her chest. "Michael," she called quietly. He looked up, impassive, waiting for her to speak, but he himself remained silent. Close, she saw new wrinkles around his eyes, the hard line of his lips. This man had truly become a stranger to her. "Thank you," Lena said, embarrassed, "for not sending me to prison." Michael narrowed his eyes slightly, hearing the informal "didn't send." He looked for another moment and finally answered evenly. "It was the court that made the decision, not me." Lena lowered her head. "I know. It's just." She couldn't find the words. She wanted to ask for forgiveness, but after everything, why? He had passed his sentence long ago. "I'm glad that you," she continued uncertainty, "that you're okay." Michael pressed his lips into a thin line. "Don't bother yourself with worrying about my well-being," he snapped. Lena nodded, taking the blow. Why had she even spoken? She was nothing to him. She took a step back. "Goodbye, Michael," she said quietly, looking into his eyes. He looked away as if these words were empty words. Then he said shortly, "Take care of yourself." And turning around, he headed towards the exit with quick steps, without once looking back. Lena stood in the middle of the courtroom until she was asked to leave. Stepping out onto the court steps, she threw her head back to the gloomy sky. The first drops of rain fell on her skin. There will be no forgiveness neither from him nor from anyone, and it is not necessary. She herself must continue to live with what she has done. But today, under this cleansing rain, Lena felt that she could endure everything. She was still breathing, walking, and thinking. That meant she would live. She turned up the collar of her cloak and stepped forward into the silvery streams. Her journey was just beginning, a journey on which she no longer expected forgiveness. And no matter how much road remained, she would walk it with her head held high. Each story is a step towards understanding yourself and the world. If this story left a mark on your soul, don't forget to support it with a like and a comment. Subscribe because it only gets stronger, deeper, and more interesting. Subscribe to our channel so that your love doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think click to the next one.